Good evening, everyone. Can everybody hear me? Okay. In a minute or so, I'm going to hand this over to Mark. He's going to lead our meditation and just have a moment here of gratitude that you're with us this evening, Mark. We're really excited to have you and grateful that you could be with us. So, Mark, you are a co-host now, so I guess you can unmute yourself.
Mm-hmm.
There you are. Okay. And so whenever you'd like to start, it's all yours, Mark. And when you're through, I'll introduce you.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
So this is one of our, I think, actual miracles is that somehow we can come together in this online community like we're doing right now. We can sit down and we can do our practice together. And it's both a miracle in terms of technology, but the miracle I was actually referring to is that 46 people are interested in doing this right now, coming together in this way. That's really a miracle. So I'll give just a few minutes worth of instructions, and then we'll have most of the 30 minutes in silence. It's always nice to begin by realizing what an essential vehicle the body is for our life right now. So just take a moment sitting comfortably. In a way, our body, this body right here, not the idea that we have of the body or the mental image of the body. I'm talking about the felt sense of body, this breathing, churning movement of sensation here. And all the subtle and not so subtle feelings that are moving now in the body. And even if the body feels numb or flat or disconnected, that's how it is. That's the living, breathing body. And I think for all of us now, the interesting question is, how is the heart relating to the body? Like it or not, the body and the heart are entwined. It's really the very nature of life. So how might we relate to this body, this movement of sensation and feeling? Even the emotional feelings are visceral, are in the body. What would be a useful, helpful, compassionate way right now for each of us to be relating to this living thing we call the body? And don't worry if you don't get it right away. You can just take your time and find a really wholesome, beautiful, and healing way to be relating, to be showing up for the truth of how the body is right now. And this isn't an idea, it's really this movement of sensation that's here and now, here in the body, here and now. So, for example, is it helpful to choose to be disconnected or uninterested? Or is it more helpful to be interested and curious, undefended, soft. As we recognize that the body is being known, sensations are being felt, as we recognize this, can we leave it all alone? Whatever's moving as sensation now, can we be both intimate and at the same time not controlling, not imposing an agenda, not even trying to get rid of tension? In a way, think of this as a gift to the body and the mind and the heart. This practice of being both intimate, clearly aware, intimate, and no agenda, no expectations, allowing the body to be. And if it's helpful, you can coordinate this reflection with your breathing. So each time you feel the breath naturally coming in, just have that reflection, being intimate with the body, knowing the body. And then each time as you're breathing out, that reflection on non-attachment, something like allowing the body to be. So if you find these meditation words helpful, you can just repeat them with each in-breath, knowing the body just as it is. With each out-breath, allowing the body to be. So we're just going to continue in silence, just doing the best we can. Let that be good enough.
Well, thank you, Mark. And now it's time to formally introduce you, Mark, to the Sangha. First of all, we're so fortunate to have such a senior, experienced teacher with us. And I'm glad we could all be here. So, Mark, you must have been just a baby when you began. I'm doing the math, and I happen to know that we were born the same year. So you were just a young pup when you started. So Mark began his practice in 1982 and has been teaching meditation since 1990. He co-founded Common Ground Meditation Center in Minneapolis in 1993 with Win Frick and continues to serve as the center's guiding teacher. Mark has studied with both Asian and Western teachers and finds deep inspiration in the teachings of the Buddha. Mark practiced as a monk for 5 months in Burma and completed 4 3-month retreats at Insight Meditation Society in Barre, Mass, as well as many months of intensive retreat practice at the Forest Refuge. Mark continues to be a grateful student of Buddhist practice. You can visit his website. It's on our website, but it's commongroundmeditation.org. Mark also teaches here in North Carolina once a year at Southern Dharma, where I first attended a retreat a couple of years ago with you, Mark. Really wonderful retreat. He also teaches a couple retreats a year, usually at Insight Meditation Society in Massachusetts. We sort of the mothership of our tradition. He's also available, his talks, his guided meditations are on dharmaseed.org, as well as you can visit Common Ground Meditation, their website. So without further ado, we welcome you. We're grateful you're with us. And I'd like to hand it over to you, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. It's really nice to be with everyone. And we get to do one of my favorite things, at least, which is reflect on, it's really our human lineage of wisdom from our people who lived before us. And they wondered, as we do when we're not overwhelmed by difficulties and not being oppressed and are privileged enough to be able to be reflective, then what often comes to mind for us humans is, what do we do with this human life? And, looking around, looking at our own experience as a human being and looking around at others, people answer or respond to that question a lot of different ways, like what to do with this life. Okay, well, I'm gonna get as much as I can get, and I'm gonna keep other people from taking it away. That's one strategy. Another is like, I'm not going to be happy until everybody's happy. That's another strategy. There's so many different strategies. And, the Dharma, these teachings from the Buddha and from all of our spiritual ancestors, it's really about bringing a lot of integrity to that question, what do we do with this human life? And so you might have seen the title for tonight's talk, and I'll probably talk for about 30 minutes or so, and we'll have at least 10 minutes for discussion. Hopefully you'll have some reflections of your own or questions. But the topic was this integrating the wisdom of non-attachment with the wholesome movement of compassionate action. And it's just one closer way of looking at that question, what do we do with this human life? Because we understand we have a lot of evidence from our own experience how painful it is when we're attached and life is unfolding in a different direction than the way our attachment would like it to unfold, right? We know that feeling. Someone doesn't love us and we want them to love us. The election goes a direction we didn't want it to go, or goes, or some, just any number of things. So we understand that attachment hurts, and that when my heart is free of attachment, there's the absence of that burden of being attached. But because a lot of times when we begin to understand the pain of attachment, this is sort of a spiritual bypass. We see it a lot, not just in Buddhist circles. So we get, like, the classic example will be just in the realm of intimate relationships, and we've been burnt a number of times, fallen in love, person doesn't love us or stops loving us, right? And then this is sort of dealing with the question what to do with this human life from a cognitive place. So then I'm going to intellectually think, okay, I'm just not going to fall in love again, you know? And it's an idea, my happiness is dependent on not falling in love, and then I'll be happy. Well, as you might imagine, it doesn't really work very well. So we eventually grow up as a human being, and we realize that as much as we might have some intuition that what we should do with this human life is realize a way of being non-attached, then as we mature, as we grow up, we realize that that non-attachment has to be in the context of intimacy, or if you don't like that word, non-attachment in the context of engagement, non-attachment in the context of showing up, leaning in, doing what needs to be done. We know there's intimacy with attachment, engagement with attachment, and we know there's non-attachment without intimacy, like that strategy I mentioned. I'm going to get my nice little house and my nice little life, and I'm going to build a big wall around it so nobody can take anything away or mess it up. But it just turns out we spend our whole life worrying if our defenses are adequate. And it always nature always wins. We can't get in control. Hope that's not breaking news to anybody. you know Whether it's our parent or our pet or our politics or even our own mind. Anybody got their mind in control? No. So this is the great dynamic: intimacy and non-attachment. And now I'm not suggesting we don't use that, leaving behind the messiness and the ungovernableness of engagement. It's very strategic, like it's really useful, like even tonight, to have 30 minutes where we, to some degree, we put down our duties and responsibilities, right? Presumably your cell phones are off. The people you live with knew to leave you alone. Maybe you had your pet in the other room, and you weren't reading the news, and you weren't dealing with the oppression and the injustices in the world. You doesn't mean you didn't care. It just means that for that 30 minutes, and for many times during our day, we choose to turn away from what is needing action, what is needing engagement. So that's a particular strategy that we're going to always use. Even the Buddha, there's many examples, like one where there was a quarrel among the monks, and they were arguing about something pretty silly, and the Buddha told them to drop it, and they told the Buddha, which was, the Buddha was pretty respected at the time, and they said to the Buddha, "Oh, you don't get hot and bothered about our argument. We'll take care of our argument. We don't want you to suffer." And the Buddha just, probably rolled his eyes. And after trying a few times, to help them put it down, he just left them. And he went out into the woods or jungle, and I mean, it's somewhat mythological, but an elephant who was having a hard time with the herd also was out in the middle of the jungle by himself, and the two took care of each other. Right, the elephant would pull fruit down from the high trees, where the Buddha couldn't reach, and offer him fruit so he could continue to live. And they had their retreat time until the Buddha was moved to come back. So that's inspiring, that we're going to want that time of retreat, of non-attachment that's dependent on seclusion. That's the easy non-attachment. Like when everything's the way we want it, it's pretty easy for me to be free of attachment. The body sensations are the way I like it, and the temperature, and the way people are treating me, and the weather, and the food, and the world around me is just how I like it. And then it's easy to not need conditions to be different, to have a lot of equanimity, to not need that attachment, that habit of struggling. So one of the reasons, it's not just about having optimal circumstances where everything is the way we like it. Even in our meditative experience, we withdraw. Like we still see when we're meditating, our eyes still work, our ears still work, our skin still feels sensations. But in some meditative practices, we don't pay attention to what the eyes are seeing, and what the ears are hearing, and what the skin is touching, and even what the mind is thinking, right? So like when I'm doing meditation on loving kindness, for example, or just feeling that sense of inner space, the space of the present moment, I, whatever my eyes are seeing, that's happening in the background. Whatever my ears are hearing, it's all happening, but the attention is not paying attention to that aspect of my experience. I'm retreating. I'm choosing not to pay attention. And in that secluded place, as Suzanne mentioned, we had a little intro to the practice at 7 o'clock, and there are a few of the people that are here now there for that. And Suzanne shared with us, how pleasant it was for the mind to retreat from the push and pull of my likes and dislikes. So we learned something about equanimity, about non-attachment, when we have really nice circumstances, like when the mind has withdrawn from its senses, from its sensitivity, and it's in its inner space, whether that inner space is the space of knowing, but not so much about what's being known, or maybe it's an inner space of loving kindness or compassion, or maybe it's just that beautiful balance of equanimity. There are many contemplations that we can use to help the mind withdraw from sense experience. And what happens in those moments is there's a very natural equanimity, a beautiful balance, a non-agitation. But that non-agitation is because the mind isn't paying attention to things that agitate it, right? So that equanimity, that peacefulness is dependent on those supporting conditions. Like I have a suitable place to let go of the world. It wouldn't be easy for us to let go of the world in the middle of Charlotte, on a busy side of a busy street with things going on around us, or even in a cluttered place in our apartment or our home, where the bills are and our unfinished things are. It may not be so easy. But if we have a relatively quiet place, I'm right now out at Common Ground, has a retreat property a little bit outside of Minneapolis and St. Paul. And so I'm here for about 5 weeks, and it's very peaceful. Not much going on out here. A few dairy farms, lots of hills and trees, a few open fields, birds, deer, and not much else. And it's relatively easy being out of the city energy. and just the, humanity and our collective neuroses in a city, right? It's relatively easy with fewer humans around me for things to quiet down and to feel that peace. But there's some stress, like even in a very peaceful sit that has arisen because my mind's really taken a vacation from what it's sensitive to. I'm sensitive to my thoughts, but I'm not paying attention to them. I'm not pushing them away, but I'm just letting the thoughts be there in the background. I'm sensitive to seeing and hearing and touching, but I'm not paying attention to those sensitivities. They're just there in the background. And in the foreground is this, for lack of a better way of talking about it, the empty space of the knowing mind, the loving space of the knowing mind, the balanced, peaceful space of the knowing mind. And I'm abiding in that space. And in that abiding, I'm noticing, oh, this is the mind that's not agitated. This is the mind that's not being pushed and pulled by experience. Oh, this is equanimity. This is peacefulness. So we get it, we get a taste of what's possible because we have supporting conditions. We have the privilege, because not every human being has the privilege. People who are really struggling for their survival in poverty or being oppressed or having difficult circumstances dealing with a terrible illness or something like that, they don't necessarily have the option to retreat if they're overwhelmed by physical pain or emotional pain or being oppressed in some way, treated badly, unfairly. So it's a privilege, but with that privilege, we get a sense of the peace that's available. And then the natural question is there in the mind: can this peace be sustained when I lose the concentration? When I lose that seclusion and I'm talking to my partner or dealing with my cat scratching the furniture, or worse, looking at the world and all the suffering and injustice in the world and feeling part of that, feeling complicit in that and motivated to do something or to raise kids or to address climate change, right? And then that's the very interesting spiritual question. Because, even at the time of the Buddha, the people, the spiritual seekers at the time of the Buddha, they knew a lot about seclusion, concentrating the mind, withdrawing the attention from the superficial aspect of seeing and hearing and thinking by not paying attention to that surface level. Let's just call that the activity of the body through the five senses: seeing, smelling, tasting, touching, and hearing, and the activity of the mind, that grosser level of the mind, the thinking mind, planning mind, comparing mind, worrying mind. That's the nature of the body and the mind. That nature is always in motion. And through meditative training, we choose not to pay attention to it. Like I mentioned, that's called seclusion. We're secluding the mind from that activity. And we learn a thing or two about the peace, the balance, the equanimity that's possible. And then the sit ends, or the knee starts to hurt and we can't sit anymore, or we have to pee, or we, get sleepy or something. But the sit ends one way or another. Even if you're a meditative master and you can sit for 24 hours, it's still going to end. And there you have a life again, an ordinary life of relationship, of a body that needs maintenance, relationships that need maintenance, a world that needs our participation, right? And then how does equanimity, how does peacefulness, how can that beautiful balance be sustained even in the midst of likes and dislikes, seductive experience, agitating experience? Where does that peace come from? How does that arise? So I like thinking about spiritual path in terms of that integration of the wisdom of non-attachment, like we, in moments, and it may be in a meditative state, but it may be you're just in your sacred spot, wherever that might be, and you're feeling loved and you're feeling safe, and you feel naturally a lot of equanimity, a lot of peacefulness, but it's dependent on those supporting causes, right? So whether it's from a meditative experience or just having a lot of positive supports around you, we learn something about the wisdom of non-attachment. Oh, my heart doesn't need things to be different than they are. I'm not attached right now. Because if you do get attached, like if you're in a nice sit and you're really calm, as soon as we get attached, like as soon as I have the thought, I don't want to lose this calm, what happens? We lose the calm, right? Because the calm is different than I like this calm, I don't want to lose it. That's a state of greed. I like this calm, I don't want to lose it. And that state of mind is stressful. Abiding in calm isn't stressful. Wanting the calm to continue is stressful. So a lot of people, human beings, especially those interested in spiritual life, they do start to taste moments of non-attachment, and we definitely want it to continue, but we start to imitate it. It's like, okay, that equanimity, that peacefulness was good, so I'm just going to pretend now that I'm back in the world that I have a lot of equanimity and I have a lot of peace. But it's an idea in my mind. Like, I'm somebody who's peaceful, I'm somebody who's balanced, I'm somebody who doesn't get rattled. So it's like we're an actor playing a role of a Buddhist. I'm somebody who's cool and doesn't get thrown off. But underneath it is there's a lot of tension, because it's like we're identified with that stance and we don't want to fail. So any little crack, we got to immediately patch it up, cover it up. No, I'm not stressful. I'm happy. I'm Buddhist. I meditate. So, maybe in the Insight Meditation community at Charlotte, you notice this inevitable Dharma stink, you could call it, right? Because it's really endemic in Buddhist circles. We all do it to some degree, uh, because we know that non-attachment, that balance and peacefulness is good. We just haven't figured out how it gets sustained when we're out in the world. In one way or another, we're all going to try imitating being peaceful, or imitating being wise, or imitating having equanimity or being balanced. Until, like, if we're lucky, a good friend's going to tell us something. They're going to pull us aside and say, why are you acting so weird? What happened to being real, in your skin, human? What happened to being human? Because this is where you meet some people who've been practicing for a while, and you're really inspired because they seem to have a lot of balance, a lot of that peacefulness, but in the same way, they're very real. Like, they have emotions that go up and down, right? But they seem to have a lot of space. So even if they act out, they seem to have a lot of space around them acting out. It doesn't get sticky or stuck. So they act out and then they go, oh, God, I just lost it. Sorry about that. I got identified with this thought, but I'm okay. I'm okay hurting. I'm okay being agitated. I'm okay feeling the pain of loss. I'm okay feeling this anger. I'm not confused by the anger I feel. I'm not confused by the lust. This is like an interesting thing, because somehow, we human beings ended up being sexual. Have you noticed? Even now in my 60s, I'm still sexual. I have sexual urges, and it's there's so much suffering and like somehow, whether it's conscious or not, thinking that we shouldn't. Oh, I've been married for almost 30 years. I shouldn't be attracted to another person. That's not okay. Well, you know, first of all, why not? So the question isn't like not to be attracted to other people, but not to be confused by attraction. Oh, of course there's attraction. It feels like this. It moves like this. Yeah, if I act on it, then all hell breaks loose like this. If I just feel it without being confused by it, then it's not a problem. It's just these urges being felt. It's what we might call life energy moving through the body and mind, which is what it's supposed to do, right? And it's not just, about being a sexual being, but, we're in this world where there's always power dynamics, always, whether it's in our most loving relationships or certainly out in the world and in the world of business, and then just around sexual orientation and gender and race and so many convoluted power dynamics. Mostly we're unconscious. And because we're unconscious, we're pushed around, even if we don't think we are, acting them out in one way or another. So part of this, like being able to be balanced, even while being real and intimate, means we have to be able to see the movement of sexual urges, see the power dynamics that are playing out in our world. We have to see everything, feel everything, and not be confused by it. And so, the basic learning dynamic is when we're overwhelmed by everything that's moving, it's not easy for us to learn anything because we're so busy with the strength of habit energy reacting to this and reacting to that. We're just lost, identified with the urges, identified with the habit energies. So the basic spiritual path is when we can, however we can, we withdraw for an hour, for 10 minutes, for a week. I think now I'm so fortunate. I think I've probably been able to withdraw in a formal retreat setting for about 3 years totally, cumulatively in my adult life. So 3 years out of, I'm 62. So from 22 to 62, 40 years, 3 years out of that altogether, I've been on formal retreat practice. So I've really taken advantage, just like we do when we have a morning sit for 30 minutes, where we withdraw from being a person with responsibility and we touch into as much peace as we're able to touch into that sit. Because even in that sit, the mind is going to be bombarded by habit energies and irritating sounds of our partner doing something in the other room or whatever it might be. And we'll just have to work with it. But it will be relatively simple. And we'll learn in that relatively simple environment, whatever insults come our way, like knee pain or disturbing sounds in that relatively simple environment, it's going to be relatively easy for us to explore our edge. Oh, this thought is coming up. This sound is being heard. This knee pain is being felt. Is it possible for my heart to remain undefended, intimate with these disturbances, these distractions? I'm not asking, right? We created a time to sit where there would be few distractions, but there's still going to be some. So those some that remain are very important because that's the edge. We don't expect our formal sitting time to be perfect, perfectly relaxed, perfectly quiet, the mind perfectly empty of thought. No, it's going to be relatively quiet. The body should be relatively comfortable until it's not. The room will be relatively comfortable, but not perfectly. And so then whatever the edge is, whatever interrupts abiding in peace, then that's our teacher showing up. Almost like you want to bow down, get your head on the floor. Oh, teacher, you've showed up, right? Because the basic thought will be, I can't practice until I make this go away. As soon as I make the knee pain go away, then I can go back to my practice of abiding in peace. So what we want to think instead is, oh, my teacher, is there a way for the heart to be peaceful, to be balanced, to be loving, even with knee pain, even with this obsession, like some people hear songs playing through their mind, right? Or some painful memory, or whatever the interruption, the distraction might be. Okay, so now then we're practicing intimacy. And I think it's okay to use the word love, because intimacy, love, compassion, it has this inclusive nature. It's saying, yes, you also belong. My well-being, my freedom, my peace doesn't depend on you not being here. Because when we're doing this practice that I'm talking about now, we're interested in an unconditioned happiness, peace, freedom, balance. Peace that's not dependent on things being perfect. Because if you haven't noticed, there isn't anything perfect. Our conditioned mind isn't perfect. Certainly, my body isn't perfect. The world is absolutely not perfect, right? The way we treat each other, not perfect. There isn't anything perfect. So we want a peace that's not dependent on perfection. We want a love, this capacity to love unconditionally, not based on things being perfect. Anybody can love a puppy that's behaving itself for a few minutes, right? Our heart's just open. But how about an irritating person? Or how about a person that wants to do us harm? Doesn't mean we should let them harm us, but we can understand that they're a human being. They're probably, if they want to harm me, they're probably suffering. And I'm going to do whatever I can to take care of myself, but I'm not going to waste my energy hating them. It doesn't help me, probably doesn't help them. We don't need that contraction in our heart to lean in, to show up, to do what the world and what our life needs us to do right now. Do we? I mean, I totally get, because I'm there too. I totally get that a lot of the times when I'm showing up in the messiness of my life, I do get tight. But I think one of the real fruits of practicing for almost 40 years now is I don't, when I am getting tight, I don't pretend to myself that I need to be tight. So I may be tight, but I more and more quickly recognize I'm tight, and I see it as being extra and unhelpful. That whatever I have to do, whatever the moment needs me to do, could be done better if I wasn't tight. I practice in little ways, like I tend to be a controlling type A personality type. So, it's like even putting on my clothes, or like I really like cooking. And like when I'm shopping and chopping vegetables and getting the meal together, it's like I don't do it with this full embodied, relaxed, balanced, peaceful vibe. I do it as if there's a race and that I'll get points for doing it efficiently and quickly, you know? Same thing with dressing and just toiletries. It's been such a long practice, just like when brushing my teeth. I remember this is a long time ago. the dentist said to me, "I think you're brushing your teeth too hard. You might be wearing down your teeth." And then I started to pay attention. It's like, why am I doing it like that? It's just that habit of struggling. So this is the invitation, like when you have greater and greater confidence because you've tasted peace, you've tasted real balance, you've tasted a kind of generous love that isn't about a particular relationship. It's just that open heartedness, that generous heartedness, right? We've tasted the freedom of the heart that is unbound because we've been fortunate to have experiences, supportive experiences that allowed for that open heartedness. And then the question is, are we willing to work the edges? Like, how can that be sustained in the world, the imperfect, messy world of engagement, of relationship? And then we're really learning something about non-attachment, from the non-attachment that arises because everything's the way we want it to be, to the non-attachment that arises because we've realized there's nobody that we have to, like, it's a little bit hard to put into words, but this non-attachment is an empowering joy, right? So it's like we're willing to let go of my personal agendas and my personal fears and just do what needs to be done. This is the real liberating insight, to realize that the self-centeredness that we carry around because it's never been looked into, it can really be put down. We don't actually need that concrete idea of me to live our life. And that's why this, what I mentioned earlier, this imitation of being wise, this imitation of being kind, it's such a self-centered trip. It's so unpleasant. Even if we're not aware that it's unpleasant, just under the surface, it's a really contracted state to need, to be this idea of needing to be wise, needing to be seen as kind is a heavy trip. But real kindness isn't about needing to be kind, and real wisdom, skillful action in the world isn't about needing to be skillful. And there's all kinds of poetic images of leaves falling off a tree in the fall, how graceful and natural and effortless nature does what it does. So our engagement in the world, whether you're a full-time activist trying to bring justice into places where there isn't much justice, or whatever you might do, raising children, growing a garden, whatever we do, however we lean in, that can be just as graceful and empty of neurotic, contracted energy as a leaf falling off of a tree. And we just need to experiment in little ways, like the things I've mentioned: dressing, brushing our teeth, making a meal, and then start with interactions so that you're interacting, going out to eat with someone, for example, can be just the activity of nature. And in that way, you're completely real. It's not the idea, I'm nature. It's like you're just letting your personality rip. You're being completely who you are, including neurotic and imperfect, and then aware that you're neurotic and imperfect, right? That's how we learn. So we start by having moments of peace, and then we feel inspired to see, what would that freedom, that ease, that release be like when things are more complicated? Let me see. Let me value the release even when things are complicated. I'm not going to get tight. I'm not going to be afraid. But we always learn best on the edges. If we're overwhelmed, we're not really going to learn. When we're overwhelmed, we all know what the thing we need to do then. We need to get someplace where we're less overwhelmed. because we're really not good for anybody when we're completely overwhelmed, right? And the kind of personality patterns that get triggered when we're overwhelmed generally aren't very skillful. So what can we do to soothe? What can we do to find some safety, some more safety? Until we get to those edges where there's enough safety, enough comfort that we can actually be interested in what's provoking reactivity. It's like, well, maybe I can just feel this. Maybe I can just stay in the body. Maybe I can be undefended. Maybe it's okay to feel this much grief. Maybe it's okay to feel this much anger. Maybe it's okay to feel this much lust. Maybe I don't need to be afraid of lust. I just don't want to act it out in a way that causes me or other people harm.
And thank you
Yeah, just,
again so much, Mark, for being with us.
oh, really nice. And what a nice way to end our time. And
Yeah.
this is a good example of the just like 2 or 3 minutes of loving kindness. But this is what I mentioned about having a memory. So let's just take a moment, sit comfortably, and we're just going to bring to mind. Some of you I noticed have your loving pets nearby, so that may make it easier for you. But all of us can probably bring to mind a time when our heart loved naturally and unconditionally. Maybe we were alone, maybe we were with someone else or a group. But it isn't so much about the memory, it's really more about that felt sense that we remember. That quality of the heart opening, that natural, generous movement of the heart, kind of warmth that has the quality of being all inclusive, like a welling up and spilling over, a kindness that can't be contained. And for just a couple minutes, we're going to do our best to remember right now this heart's capacity for love, for kindness, and just abide in the generosity of this goodness. May this goodness of love continue. May it increase and may it never end. Like a warm smile that shines out, radiates out to all beings without exception. May this goodness of love continue and increase and never end. Including to our body, we feel the body being touched by this warmth, this generous love. And all those who are near to us, people we live with, neighbors, all the people here on the Zoom call with us. May this goodness of love continue. May it increase. May it never end. So just a couple minutes of silence, just learning to abide in the generosity of the heart. So nice being with you this evening. I hope that we connect on the road somehow, somewhere, and wishing everyone safety out there.
Nice. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, thank you for the invite. Bye-bye, everyone.
Dave.